And we are live.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, welcome to the Pluralist method. Today is our Sunday show. I think we got a great little topic here that came up within your academic studies, and you decided to branch off of that. And we'll
I probably will
dig
be
into
doing,
it a little deeper.
Yeah, in all honesty, I'll probably be doing a little bit of that as we progress forward. If anyone doesn't know what I'm studying, it's public administration, so it kind of ties pretty damn well into our political topics.
Well, technically, I think no one knows if we're going off the basis of just having random people watching this.
That's true.
You make it like you announced it to the world. And,
exactly. Well, the world now knows.
Yeah, everyone knows.
Yes,
Everyone's like,
everyone.
oh, well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, they're writing it down in their little black books, and they're preparing
the little black books. You write it down there.
I don't know, man. You tell me.
I don't know. You brought it up.
They're preparing for when...
they got like some dirt on you or something.
Oh, exactly. We can't tell anyone, really.
Dylan's studies that's the dirt.
Yeah, my graduate studies
I
in
know
public administration.
What you've been studying.
I'm going to get blackmailed for that. Today's topic is whether distrust in the political system within America is essential to its functioning.
This is distrust in America's government essential for the functioning of our system.
Yes. Hey man, I don't have.
No, that's fine. I was just wanted to throw the title out there. It's close enough.
Yeah.
Of course, before we get started, I just want to let everybody know, please like and subscribe if you have not already. Follow us on Twitter at Pluralist Method.
Yes.
And toss us a tip or donation if you are able to.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Also, of course, if you have any comments or questions or whatever, feel free to toss them out there, and we will try to get to them at the end of the show.
Yes,
we will get to them at the end of the show.
We absolutely will. We actually enjoy that quite a bit.
Yes, that's really adds a lot, I think. So definitely, if you have any even if it seems like a stupid question, it doesn't matter. Throw it out there. At the very least, it'll provide some entertainment or humor.
Yeah, or even a tangential comment.
Sure.
Might even be useful if it's loosely related to our topic. Would be kind of
or if it's just something silly.
Yeah, I like silliness.
Sure. All right, so let's just jump into it.
Absolutely.
As far as an overview, do you have anything you wanted to point out there before we directly get to the question?
No. As far as like the history of the distrust.
Well, I do. Yeah, I know we had slight differing. Yeah, as far as because for me personally, I went off the idea of you have just your general day-to-day distrust that fluctuates based on
experience,
the party or whoever might be in your federal powers as far as president, senators, and whatnot. It tends to, I believe, especially in the last couple of decades, it's kind of decreases the closer it gets to home. So more of your local and state politicians tend to have a little more trust within them. But when it comes to the president or whomever, that's when the distrust seems to get up there. And of course, depending on
folks in Washington, if you will.
Yeah, sure. That's a good way of putting it. And of course, whoever, whatever party you might fall under or ideology you may believe, that's going to heavily impact the amount of distrust or
even trust you have in a system.
And so you have that side of things, but then you also have kind of what I feel sort of a foundation of America in coming from a monarchy in England, moving over to here, people looking for more individual liberties, kind of a freedom of the people kind of thing, like your traditional classic. There's a big blob of spit that just flew out of my mouth.
Great podcast.
Like classic liberalism, that kind of thing. Kind of individual liberties and people sort of wanting their own freedoms and to govern themselves.
Their fundamental rights as individuals, as citizens of a government, and the powers they have over their lives.
Sure, the life, liberty, happiness, and pursuit of happiness.
And comparing that to the power that a government has over your life, and the extent that power can be utilized to affect you.
Especially seeing as, like I said, they had just come from a very, you could say authoritarian kind of power, a large monarchy, which ruled very strongly over its citizens. And so that was kind of my two ideas when it comes to distrust within the government, something that's sort of embedded within American quote unquote values, and then just the general sentiment amongst the people that can vary year to year, decade to decade.
Yeah, I had and this is actually kind of interesting because when Jeremy and I were talking about this, we had completely different ideas as to what distrust or
what the question means. Yes. What is distrust, and our original question means.
Exactly. So it was kind of cool.
Which is interesting because it does seem like it would have perhaps one simple answer, or where the root where it's all coming from would be more clear, but it's not.
I absolutely agree with that. And furthermore, I'd like to point to just as you did, the differences within ideologies is important, but not only that, there's also the relationship between public sector and private sector that comes into play.
Sure.
The efficiencies or inefficiencies within government agencies, and taxes. Basically, all of those are factors in generating distrust of the government. But as our question states or asks, is that distrust essential to government? And the easy answer is yes and no. So actually, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your understanding of the question, because I didn't think of that, in all honesty. So
which part specifically?
Basically that since we were founded from a split from a monarchy, there is a fundamental intrinsic idea that government should be limited as much as possible, and that idea is founded on skepticism and some mistrust of governments as a whole. You want to prevent them from abusing their powers.
Sure.
I absolutely overlooked that in my studies and in my thought processes. So I was wondering.
And that shows how you can take it either way, because I assumed that was right where you were going with it.
Oh, yes.
That was my initial kind of, like, because it's built upon this idea, if that were to give out or no longer exists, it would sort of, the whole system would collapse. That's where I was coming from with that.
And I absolutely agree. The fundamental ideology of, and I don't want to just call it distrust. I'm also going to call it some skepticism as well.
Sure.
For our purposes, we're going to use those interchangeably for this topic, even though there are some nuanced differences between the terms. But the skepticism that you would have following the split from a monarchy would provide you with an ideology that basically allows you to create a new government that is full of checks and balances. Those separations of power that are essential for our government to function. And your statement was that if we took out the distrust, or if we took out the skepticism, the whole ideology that built this country would fail. And I absolutely agree with that.
Those core concepts is kind of, what you could say America's built on.
Oh, yeah.
And by removing that, it's, you're pulling out the bottom piece on the Jenga tower.
So I want to go as far as this idea is concerned. I want to go through a hypothetical with you.
Okay.
What would happen actually?
I'm not sure if I can have all the answers here, but
well, that's why it's hypothetical,
sure.
And a lot of this will be conjecture, but I think this would be kind of fun to do this thought experiment. If we reduced the skepticism that the founding fathers had in government, what government do you think would have been erected following a split with a monarchy?
I think it would probably lean more towards.
Of course,
I'm trying to kind of think of what would have existed at the time of like an idea, because obviously it wouldn't have been a monarchy, but it might have been something that where there's sort of, I don't want to say more of a socialist style government, but something where it's a bit more authoritarian and the government has a lot more control in people's affairs and as far as how things should be laid out. So a lot of the independence, I don't think capitalism wouldn't have thrived as well under that kind of system. More of a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? A set economy where the economy's a planned economy kind of idea, where you're not allowing those,
where it's government run.
Where you're not allowing especially early on when there was a lot more freedom as far as regulations and those kind of things. You're not really, I'm sounding like a huge libertarian here, but you're not really allowing those to sort of run their course and have things play out in the way they did in like the Industrial Revolution. And
so I also need to preface or make sure everyone understands, this is predicated upon an idea that if the mistrust is gone, the founders and the revolutionaries would have still attempted to cede from England's control in the first place.
I think it might have been more a system that was similar to a monarchy, but without having the bloodline, essentially.
So, I'm actually, I kind of agree, and in a way I kind of disagree. Okay. I don't know if individual rights are predicated upon mistrust of the system rather than a ideology that that citizens have fundamental powers that are theirs to control, powers over their own lives. Where I do agree with you, though, is that I do think it would have been very similar to a monarchy, especially when you're analyzing the separation of powers. It's much more likely if there was reduced skepticism that there wouldn't be a separation of powers in the first place. It would be a system where the legislative and executive control are consolidated into one branch of government.
Sure.
And possibly the judicial branch as well, but there could be some leeway for that being its own separate branch still. But
what was the system under in France pre-French Revolution? Was it Louis the 14th? Where it wasn't necessarily a monarchy. I mean, it kind of was, but they had one governmental power and kind of everything was clumped together. I'm trying to think. What was that? You don't know what I'm referring to as far as Louis? I think it was Louis the 14th.
Nope. Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay. We won't go there then.
I know it was following the idea of absolute monarchy. It was a transition of government from absolute monarchy, which is the idea that a monarch has power over everything, and there's the concept of divine right, which means God actually gave those powers to that king or queen, to that royal family, and has blessed their bloodline to rule over that geography. What transpired after that, I'm not completely sure. I do know that he had barons and other...
Yeah, because it was made up, and even certain kind of consultants and people that would perhaps have some sort... You still had the single authoritarian head, which would make the final decision and have that quick, lay down the law whenever it needs to be. There's not running through any sort of governmental system. But I think there was remnants of, you might think of as being like consultants or departments.
Advisors, if you will. Like a cabinet of individuals. That could be a possible system. But I do want to stipulate that I do think that there originally or early on in the government, if the revolutionaries decided to form a government other than actually did.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the individual freedoms would initially be quite large, but as time moved on, it would be constricted little by little, incrementally, if you will, to the point where the governmental system would eventually evolve into something maybe fascist or maybe almost like an oligarchy.
Okay.
That's my personal.
And I also want to point out as well,
all through conjecture.
Sure. I mean, that's what all this is. I also want to point out as well, I think a lot of the ideas that some people may still hold now would be a little bit different than, the idea of liberty and having those. I mean, as you said, having the government and the distrust of government and the skepticism and sort of you having that control over the government's sort of the servant to the people. The idea, I think, would be a little bit flipped, and that would be instilled within generations. So you'd have people more willing to give over a lot of their rights in a way, but have the government sort of just lay things out for them. Similar to, not quite, but similar to what you have in like the European countries, where they're a little more, they allow for a little more just kind of let the government take care of these kind of things and not really hold a lot of those American values, what people would say are American values, so dear.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There would be an evolution of ideologies. We may in this alternate timeline have evolved to become a more collectivistic society.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah,
getting at.
We're like how there is a big debate amongst universal healthcare around universal healthcare right now, and whether that should be or shouldn't. A lot more that kind of thing, I believe, probably would have went in place decades ago, because people would be much more accepting of just kind of having the government take care of that kind of thing.
I do want to add to that. I think it would have been a lot less efficient.
As far as it's specifically in healthcare or
healthcare and total, actually, I'm going to say total, primarily because I think that there would be less innovation within our society. I don't think we would have seen...
Oh, sure. That's what I was pointing to at the beginning, as far as not allowing for capitalism to thrive as it did. That's what I meant exactly by that, and kind of have the Industrial Revolution, how those pieces fell into place.
Additionally, I'd state that due to the fact that I'm positing that I think it would become an oligarchy, I think that the titans of industry, if you will, of that time would have taken hold and really exerted their power over that governmental system, basically stagnating any future innovation. I think it would occur specifically in that way.
You think so, or you don't think the government would have enough authority there to kind of shut that down before they were able to even take...
Money's power. And I mean, if you control industry, you control a lot. Especially...
Sure, but if they can, the government, it has such a strict regulation over the industry to begin with. I mean, in a way, it's almost everything becomes... It becomes sort of a puppet to the government.
Yes. Well, it depends on...
I'm kind of thinking of how, like, China and their industries...
Yes, but let's think about this. Okay, so in this case, there are some established wealthy industrialites during that are coming into power during the formation of America. Now, those industrial powers would definitely be able to influence the structure of government in their favor in the first place, creating an oligarchy rather than a governmental controlled company. While it would be titled a governmentally controlled company, the heads of those companies, those industries, would have immense power.
Perhaps, or you could see these sort of the people with all the money within, whatever business or, as you said, industry heads that we had back in that time. They may have just moved into the government, seeing they could have a lot more control there.
I mean, either way, it's still an oligarchy.
Well, sure, but then but at what point, if they just become a government employee and no longer sort of have that...
At that point,
business stand, like it kind of blurs the line.
I'd say, because you're arguing over the title rather than the actual content behind the title. It's still, in either case.
Well, sure, but couldn't you argue anyone who had been in business before and moved into government, that caused to become an oligarchy? I mean,
no, because a lot of times you have to cede your control over that business, or else you have a public conflict.
Well, that's what I was saying. They might do something along those lines
where they wouldn't care. They'd still maintain control, you're saying?
They wouldn't. No, they wouldn't.
Oh, no, I'm stating that absolutely would not happen. They want that power because that institution or industry that they thrived upon, they want to keep that, as well as increase their power within government by incorporating themselves within government, by creating a governmentally run industry. That's what I think, in all honesty. I think that people are much more greedy than your ideas kind of.
Well, I don't know if they would be greedy, but they're basically still going after power. I mean, they wouldn't have.
Why would they cede power that they already have to get?
It depends on how much power that business at that time. I don't know, as far as industries at that time, how much power they might have actually had.
I'm honestly.
I mean,
not
who
sure
knows?
either.
As far as it might not have had like a Amazon type business back then. I don't know what that. Perhaps there was some individuals that came over with large amounts of funds already from a wealthy family or landowner in Europe, and they did come over and do that kind of thing. Maybe, but I'm not. If it's more like a startup type and kind of. When I say startup again, I'm just imagining it's like startup back in, like the 1600s.
we must grow with it from the ground up.
But no, like
investors,
like sort of building their industry roots within America might not really have that much power or wealth at the time, and see that as an opportunity to sort of abandon that route and go into, I don't know. I can't.
That is a possibility. I was working off the premise that they were already well established. If
that is the case, I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
If someone is already coming in with tons of wealth already, or a large industry in that sense, I would. Yeah. They would probably take that route.
My premise was more plantation owners of large agricultural lands. Those basically, in that society, it created kind of an aristocracy.
I mean, you could almost say, this was being a bit later, but a lot of that was the reason something like the Civil War happened, because of the plantation owners sort of wanting that free labor in slaves. So, and that was an industry that existed in the South but didn't exist in the North. So in a way, they sort of influenced the government to take on that route because they wanted that continual free labor to increase their profits.
Oh, absolutely. Slavery is literally greedy people influencing government. So,
don't want to pay your workers a lot? Here's the best option.
Yeah,
just enslave them.
Actually, there have I know you're being quite sarcastic, but it is quite interesting. People would like to note that there are scholarly studies that posit that slavery was actually less profitable because work ethic dwindled because, well, they're slaves. In all honesty, if you paid the people and gave them some basic rights,
efficiency
they
wasn't
would
there.
actually produce at a higher rate. So slavery, economically, and the scholarly articles actually show economically that it would have been better.
The idea of giving people raises and things like that is promoting them in jobs nowadays is the same concept, because you want to increase their efficiency if they're going to have a better output.
So
diminishing returns aside.
So the slave owners were actually doing themselves a disservice. So fuck you, slave owners. So anyway, but no, if we're going off your premise that the individuals in power, while they may have some money, are not established, then I absolutely can see them trading off the building of a industry for going into government. Absolutely. I kind of ascribe to the idea that there are probably a couple, if not a small group.
I'd have to look into it. I'm sure you're probably right. I can imagine but I'd have to look and see as far as.
Yeah. But yeah, those are some possibilities. But yeah, I thought that would be a pretty cool thought experiment, as far as an alternate timeline as
alternate
how
timelines. Everybody loves them. And then we'll go into what if Hitler got into art school or whatever.
Oh yeah, let's talk about
the World War II alternate timelines that everyone loves.
Yeah, maybe a future Wednesday show. If I ever after during winter break or something, after class kind of simmers down a little bit for me. So
I went a bit off course there, but
yeah,
we'll bring it back around.
But basically, the premise is the governmental structure would be vastly different if skepticism or distrust in institutions that have power over citizens was reduced. Now,
I would say not even the governmental system, but the beliefs people might hold in as far as the values they have. The idea of being what is an American, I think, would even be a little bit different.
Of course, but that would evolve over time.
Well, sure, yeah. But I mean, initially from that would result in the evolution of a different way of thought.
Sure, I agree with that. Now, I absolutely agree with that, and I also think that there are some other factors as well. So getting to, I guess, my understanding of the question when I first posed it, okay. I was working off of a need for our governmental system in the United States to have competing factions. Basically, there have to be two or more, because I mean doesn't have to be specific, competing ideologies mm-hmm. that are trying to gain power and push forth their own agendas and create law through those actions. With that, with those two competing or multiple competing factions, you have groups of citizens that follow those ideologies. Now, naturally, one faction will eventually gain control for a time period and have majority control over another faction, mm-hmm. kind of like the way it is now. There is one part of Congress and the executive branch are both controlled by the Republicans. Now, what that does is it allows for Republicans to more easily, if not to say that it's going to be very easy, but more easily establish laws that they want to push through.
Sure.
And that'll increase the distrust in the government for citizens who ascribe to the Democratic ideology, because they are not being represented in this current form of the government. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. There was a time when Barack Obama actually controlled both House and Senate, yep. and he controlled the executive branch. And there was and he had
that was the beginning of his
his administration,
because he lost it in the second term,
mm-hmm.
as a lot of incumbent presidents tend to.
Yes, it acts as a referendum, and there's a lot of, and actually I do want to get into that in a second. Okay. Midterms are a great example of that. But with President Obama and being in office at the time, and with him during the beginning of his presidency having Democratic control of House and Senate, mm-hmm. The Republican mistrust of the governmental system skyrocketed. And that's going to happen naturally because they feel like their ideologies are not being represented. You can probably see that. You said you had some
I actually
polls,
have some. I'll bring this up real quick.
And I can guarantee that it will reflect.
I actually have
polls.
some polling data on this.
Mm-hmm.
We'll pull that up. So here it's just going through originally from Eisenhower to Trump. And then we have it through Republican and lean Republican and Democrat and lean Democrat. So you see this spike, that's kind of anomaly on the George Bush there.
Yes. Well, that was.
We know the reason why.
Yes. There was some
and then
issues
of course
there.
Here you see the drop throughout Obama, and a little bit of a spike coming into Trump, and then here spike up from Obama
into
and
Trump,
then yes, and then down out of Trump, and then hard to see. Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, I mean that just
it
basically confirms what we were saying.
Mm-hmm. Now, the fact that you brought up midterms is a great example of mistrust in a president. Mm-hmm. On the occasion that a president is elected and he controls one or two houses of Congress, the House or Senate, it is very likely within the midterm elections that there will be a referendum. Now, what that does is, due to the fact that, and this is my theory at least, so due to the fact that a president is elected in office from one faction, let's mm-hmm. say the Democrats during Obama's administration, in the fact that he had control of, and that Democrats had control over House and Senate, it increased distrust within the Republican Party, which will increase voter turnout during midterm elections, which makes it more likely that that party, if you ascribe to an idea that basically they're close to even, if not even, but close to even numbers in each party, which currently it's somewhere kind of near there, within a margin of error. That increased voter turnout based on mistrust will elect a Republican House or Senate to provide a check on the other political party. So there's a great example of mistrust just working this.
I will say on that, I do think that is part of the reason, but I mm-hmm. will also say that obviously I believe part of the reason is also due to kind of more of your, I don't want to say fence setters, but the people that can sway from one side or the mm-hmm. other, your independents or your nonpartisans that tend to vary in their direction as far as which side they choose. Mm-hmm. If they come in with a president,
that like is Obama, definitely a factor,
and
yes.
and they don't see the promises that he made mm-hmm. being kept or things not getting done as well as they'd hoped, so they kind of maybe sway a little more to the Republican side, just as in George W. Bush, when he was reelected, he lost. I don't know if he lost it in 2004, but I believe the next cycle, 2006, I believe, he ended up losing the Senate, I believe, maybe even Congress as well. So I believe that's correct, right? He may have. It might not have been both, but it's another kind of the idea of they don't see these promises being made or that distrust is lowering, mm-hmm. but more so amongst the people that sort of sit in the middle. I think it's a factor of both of those.
I absolutely agree. That absolutely is a factor, and to that point, there is a small percentage, very small percentage of voters that did vote for Obama during his two elections and switched to Donald Trump during the last presidential election. So
I'd also like to see the amount of voters that switched during the midterm for Obama, because I mean it was a closer race the second time around. He lost two states, Nevada and I believe Wisconsin. Or
you also gotta understand that during midterms there is a decreased voter turnout overall.
Sure.
And that decrease in voter turnout could be a factor, depending on which party more heavily stays home.
Well, I guess
so that could be a factor. But
when we say midterm, as far as, maybe I'm using it wrong. Midterm,
the election cycle in between, in the middle of.
Yes, I'm mistaken there. I meant as far as Obama's second running, as far as the.
Okay. No. Yeah.
I was mistaken.
Okay. It's the election cycle in the middle of
which would have been which would have been, like I said, in 2006, I believe. But no, I meant as far as the 4 years. Yeah, I would like to see the amount that may perhaps flipped in the first 4 years. I'm not sure. Because it was a lot closer race that time around. And that's when he, of course, lost the Senate, I believe. And I would like to see if that plays out. But anyways. It would be
interesting.
That was my fault. I used that incorrectly.
I absolutely believe that I'm going to argue just that I think that distrust of a government or a political party, at least in the case of midterms, are the largest factor for now as to providing a referendum on an executive branch's political party. I hope I stated that correctly, but I think I did. Furthermore, I wanted to talk about taxes. And governmental or administrational inefficiencies. A lot of the increase in distrust and skepticism of our government stems from scandals that are revolving around misuse of taxpayer dollars. And gross
the welfare queen.
That anyway, I have some issues with that story.
Continue. I didn't mean to distract.
Sorry. Anyway, but also with oversights gross misuses of taxpayer dollars to fund agencies that increase red tape and increase inefficiencies and aren't cost effective. So that the misuse of money is kind of big in developing mistrust. And this is the aspect where I say that this mistrust regarding this area could be reduced, and the government would still function in a capacity that is comparable to it was there in the first place.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I was actually listening to something. It's funny that you mentioned that, because when you started to bring that up, it kind of sprung to mind. I was just listening to something earlier, and it was a podcast, a show on this one network here, but they were basically saying the same thing about the idea of distrust and welfare. There kind of being a correlation between the people who distrust the government as well as dislike welfare and those sort of ideas. It was pretty much everything lined up when it came to that. So I was on the same page when I was listening to this, and I was like, that's exactly what they were going into. So.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, it's actually kind of sad in a way.
And also as well as kind of the idea that people don't always understand where the government provides support, and certain things they might not believe they're being supported by the government in a way where it's like, oh, that's not government funds, or oh, that's not welfare in that sense.
Misconceptions about how money is being used and the programs that
it's like, oh, that's just being taken out of my paycheck, but it's like,
no, it's being used for something.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, it's different because I worked for that, and but it's still the same thing.
Yes, that or those ideas are quite pervasive and definitely contribute to distrust in our government. And of course, there are answers, straightforward answers that have a underlying current of intense nuance. But basically, if you can create a more cost-effective way of doing something by increasing the efficiency that an agency is producing. So the rate of production. If you can increase the rate of production within an agency, trust for that agency will go up because you're using those tax dollars more wisely. Of course, decreasing scandal and incorporating a large amount of transparency in an organization is quite helpful for reducing distrust as well and skepticism. Because
they see the government as functioning efficiently and there's not this overwhelming idea of waste and, like you said, scandal and controversy surrounding programs or groups and organizations that function within the government.
With that being said, there will always be a faction, the opposing faction, whose ideologies may not be reflected in a certain agency or organization. They will always mistrust the government just due to that the fact that that agency exists. And that ties into the warring factions, competing factions of the government.
Yeah, there's certain sects of the Republican Party that believe no matter what kind of welfare it is, it almost shouldn't exist.
Yes, and I was actually, that's what I'm
even if you remove all the waste and it's completely a perfect program, they're still going to not.
And what I was actually going to say is even if you can increase the rate of production within the welfare system or a government funded program to the point to where it's comparable to a capitalistic model of productivity, there would still be skepticism in the one faction,
even if
because it's governmentally run.
Not even comparable, even if it surpasses in some way, if it's like a utopian version of it, it still would.
Absolutely.
It could be the perfect utopian version of whatever system it is.
The opposing values, the value set that this faction of the Republican Party ascribes to is not such that a program funded by the government is useful. That's their basis. They think that government intervention is wrong and should only be done, if ever, in very, very limited circumstances. And of course, the opposite is true as well. There are factions within the Democratic Party that think that there should be a vast increase in government oversight, possibly to the point where we may be giving up certain individual rights. So warring factions create kind of a balance for us, which it's actually,
always kind of that balancing game there where it's
which leads
the push and pull between.
And it leads to the conclusion that mistrust on both sides kind of leads us to a good middle ground. A middle ground that we kind of need, or else we'd probably become a little more extreme one way or the other, and less efficient.
That was a very neutral kind of stance or take on the whole thing.
No, well, the thing is, it is absolutely neutral. I'm becoming an academic. But no, that's literally all I got. What is our timeline?
Oh, we still got plenty of time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually all I freaking had. Do you have anything?
Well, let me ask this as far as I don't really have too many questions either, but
that's all right.
Let me ask this as far as you came back to that kind of the middle ground on it. Is there any way you might want to make improvements upon it as far as, if there's always this push and pull, there's always the distrust from either side, how can, I guess we can improve upon that in some way?
I think, in all honesty, the answer is improving public discourse.
Okay. I mean, that needs to be done.
Well, and here's why, and here's why I think this is an effective answer, even though it's kind of not directly.
I think I know where you're going with this, but yeah.
But so for the audience, basically, if you increase public discourse and increase rational thought and critical thinking, then even individuals with who are utilizing opposing value sets can come together and converse and have a meaningful discussion about what policies and laws would be good for them, and what and ultimately what compromises they can make, because not all of those values are going to be completely different. Some of them are just a reorganization of the priorities in which those values
or kind of they have an objective something they're trying to achieve, but they just have different ways of going about.
Absolutely.
Different means of going about,
And actually, I'd say in a lot of cases that's the primary point. So I think discourse could allow for more understanding. It also makes you right now we're seeing some polarization within the United States. Surrounding
just now
surrounding well, it's getting worse, surrounding radicalization
sparks,
of certain ideologies, and public if you incorporate effective public discourse and critical thinking and reasoning and logic, I think you can reduce the number of radical ideologies that are out there, because people will become more understanding of one another. And that essentially will help the government.
And even people who may not be in more of a radical ideology, but just sort of stick to party lines and kind of put up that barrier where it's kind of just plugging your ears and going, no, I can't hear you.
That's
because they
thing.
they just, vote for whatever's red, whatever's blue. And even if someone tries to lay out or explain, how they're thinking they're going about this the wrong way, and their thinking is basically to their own detriment, they're still,
Yeah, actually, I want to bring that home. It's very likely that if you increase the effectiveness of public discourse, the individuals who are voting on party lines would be more likely to come to understand that it's that they don't have to toe party lines at all. It's not essential.
Well, that's what you would want to achieve there.
Yes. Become a rationally thinking individual, and you might find that you actually disagree on some substance that of a political party you might affiliate yourself with. I mean, I know that's the case for me. There are certain aspects of ideologies and value sets that I have that do not completely align with the Democratic Party, and vice versa. There are definitely quite a few that don't align with the Republican Party. I'm going to be very honest. I am more liberal than I am conservative. So that's been said.
Fair enough. And I believe this is something that's, excuse me, that within the past couple decades has become a bigger issue. These people voting along party lines. I mean, I could be mistaken, but, looking back 50 to 70 years, I feel like people were more willing to, as well as, the parties coming closer together as far as, the values they might hold. You're having candidates that might be on the left or the right, but still have some crossover, and people are more willing to cross from party lines and not always.
I would like to throw a factor that may challenge that perception.
Okay. And like I said, I may be incorrect. I have.
I think that you are correct, but I think that that was only that it wasn't considering race as a factor. If you look back 50 to 70 years, even in today's electorate, but especially then, suppressing the black vote and minority voters was a huge thing. And they were not allowed to be part of public discourse in the first place, which makes it easier for the racial majority to come into power, and they're easier to come to agreements within themselves because of the idea of in-group associations.
Sure.
and they kind of come together and look at racial or an ethnic minorities as the out group, the minority. So I think that if you put race into context, and you if you went back 50 to 70 years and allowed for more expression of ideas among minority voters, I think that you'd probably see as the polarization we're about to see. I think, in all honesty, this has been a long time coming.
Sure.
We're in the midst of an evolution, and I think that while it's bad now, it will get a lot better once we cross this hump.
No, I could agree with that. It's not something I thought of, but yeah.
That was
probably right there.
Yeah. That's at least my idea. I actually don't have a whole lot of information to back that up, but every time I've heard someone say that political discourse was so much better back in the day, I think that's because we were screwing over a whole racial group.
Well, actually, speaking of race, I wanted to. It's somewhat goes back into what we were discussing as far as welfare and an idea of that being a race issue as well.
I really don't like that. I'm sorry.
Did you want to go into that in a?
No. Okay. So when you brought up the welfare queen, there was.
So, what do you want to go over it real quick?
Well, the history of that, it was during, I believe, Reagan's. Yes, during Reagan's era. There was a huge the propaganda machine, if you will, produced rhetoric basically stating that that individuals were abusing the system, the welfare system, to their personal gain, and they were becoming rich off of it. Off of the backs of hardworking Americans.
Kind of this idea of this lady driving around, and you could even say like a black lady driving around in like a big fancy Cadillac and luxurious clothing and whatnot.
And that actually created the stigma for the welfare system. In all honesty, the audience should know, and actually all of America should know, that the percentage of abuses on the welfare system is quite low, extraordinarily so, to the point to where over time we've actually due to the fact that we've developed rules and regulations that oversee anyone who's using welfare. If you're on unemployment in Virginia, you have to prove that you have applied for X amount of jobs and that you have gone to X amount of interviews within a certain time frame. And then you have to do it again over the next month and over the next month until you get a job. Now, of course, there are some other things as well, drug testing, because that was also a thing in the early 2000s and 90s. We're like, oh yeah, they're taking unemployment and just all doing drugs.
Well, I mean, that's still an idea that's come around lately as well. People
and that's largely bullshit. You cannot get welfare if you are doing drugs. At least in Virginia. There may be federal rules otherwise, but I know in Virginia that's true. As far as unemployment and for what is it when you hurt yourself on the job?
Yeah. It's like medical injury or it's job injury leave kind of.
Yes.
You get paid for basically if you're out for long periods of time.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, but it there's a program that it revolves around that. Disability, no, it's not disability. Okay, I don't remember the name, but you also need drug testing for that. So, I personally don't like the stigmatization that we have put on the welfare system, and I honestly think that it would be helpful, one, for us to become to produce some sort of transparency showing that there isn't an abuse on the system without, I guess, giving away private information of the citizens using that information, because that's very important as well, while also increasing the efficiency of those programs themselves, because I do think that there are some actually not some, there are a ton of efficiency problems within the welfare system that I think need to be contended with, specifically with, information gathering, the method in which we are paying for those programs, as well as whether or not we could come up with a possible system where we have competing programs that are yes, and that was my idea, where there are competing programs to gain government funding, and the one that's the most efficient wins. So I kind of like that competitive spirit as well. But those are just some ideas. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add.
I mean, now you laid out most of the thoughts that exist as far as when it comes to welfare programs and the ideas people have. I mean, everyone's heard an anecdote from a friend or someone talking about, I saw a drug dealer trading for food stamps, or I saw, someone buying, filet mignon at the grocery store with their food stamps, or someone, pumping out kids so they can get the WIC money and the funds, the welfare funds for having children and stuff like that. I mean, everyone's heard tons of these stories. I mean,
yeah, and in most cases, the majority of the people are just people who would actually love to find a job, because the stigma a lot of times is not worth the money you'd get from the welfare system.
Especially because you're not living any sort of fruitful or prosperous life. It's not like this is some life of luxury where you don't have to do anything. You're basically getting the bare minimum compared to any other sort of first world country that exists nowadays.
Now I would say that there are probably some
there's always
of
there definitely is. There's always going to be off cases, and there's going to be someone that abuses it. Of course there is.
Yes.
And people will take those and inflate it into a massive everyone's just some such racial minority group is abusing this system or this system. Just like the idea of immigrants coming over and abusing it, while at the same time taking our jobs.
Yes,
which seems
which is crazy. Also,
get that unemployment while you're on the job,
Yeah. Also, there are rules within our system already that state that immigrants who are trying to become citizens cannot use welfare for a certain number of years. That's already in place. So that's already been protected. So the people who are arguing for that, if they're talking about illegal immigrants, they don't have access to welfare systems because they're illegal and they don't want to be deported.
Not to mention even though they may not be taxed on their income, they're still paying more into the tax pool through sales tax, other forms of tax they may have, while not being able to tap into that at all. So essentially, they're pouring more into the system through that than actually
receiving
little
less
to none.
benefit.
Yes.
Yeah. Dang, I did not mean to hit that. Earthquake, everyone. But yeah, so I have some issues regarding that. The stigma that came about due to that rhetoric was in large part racially motivated. And there were some other motivations as well. I'd say race would be
racial, as well as kind of looking to continue to cut back on a lot of these welfare programs.
The trimming of the fat ideology, which is
cut the taxes.
Yeah. So that's the world we're in. You have any other questions?
No, that's about it. It'll be a little bit of a short one here. No, there's one person on here. So.
All right. Hello, one person.
I don't think they're commenting. Just someone who put it up on there and not even paying attention.
That's okay.
Oh, well. We'll get him next time.
Yeah.
Mission failed. We'll get him next time. Anyways.
What video game was that
That's
from?
Call of Duty.
I knew that.
It got turned into a meme.
Yep.
You've seen it, right? Where someone will, I don't know, a silly video of someone coming up and asking someone out, and then mission failed, we'll get them next time.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. I think that's about it for today. It'll be a little bit of a short show, about 20 minutes shy, but
that's all right.
We'll come back next time.
Yeah.
As far as I missed this past Wednesday, but I will be hopefully coming up with something that's going to be, it might be something a little different, but I will be, I'm sorry, Nat, it's tricky on your own.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I'll get something to fill that spot so we can keep up the content coming out. Of course, do you have any hints for next week's topic or any ideas yet?
I have a couple ideas. Actually, I'm contending with 2 or 3 of them, so I do not have a hint right now because I'd like to talk to you after the show and figure out
fair enough.
We're going to do.
Also, I think in the political sphere or the current election cycle, I believe, I don't know if we mentioned it, but Inslee is out.
Inslee is out, and yes. So is Moulton. Seth.
I didn't see.
Yeah.
He joined pretty late anyway, so he's only been in there for maybe a month.
And he never once met the debate stage.
He literally, I think he jumped in a day before.
That is his
name,
right? Moulton?
Yeah, it's like Seth Moulton, I think. He jumped in I think a day before the first debate. Yeah.
So he bowed out as well.
In and out, real quick.
Yep. We will likely see a couple more people drop out. Maybe 1 or 2 before the next Democratic
get Delaney
debate.
Out of there.
And I will guarantee that we'll see a slew of individuals dropping out following the 3rd Democratic debate. I think it'll probably be down to whoever makes the debate, the 3rd debate, and they automatically qualify for the 4th. So those will be the people, and it's possible that some of them will even run out of.
Yeah, I mean, once you haven't come up to the 3rd debate and you haven't even gotten to that yet, you're running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
As far as unless you've just got money to burn.
Yeah, like Steyer. I wonder if he's made it in yet. He only needed 1 more poll, which was interesting.
We'll see.
Yeah, but also the Democratic primary will be coming up mid-September, I believe, within the 2nd week.
Primary for
Democratic primary debate.
Oh yeah. We were just talking about.
Yeah, what we were just talking about. Yes,
the 3rd debate.
Be coming up in, I think it's mid-September, early
beginning September. Yeah.
But yeah, so we should all tune into that because that's going to be awesome. And I will be coming on the following Wednesday podcast to talk about that.
Overview.
All right. Yeah.
All right. I think that's about it. Anything else you want to throw in there?
Not at all. Thanks for watching. I'm Dylan.
Of course. No, we got to do that.
Oh, dang. Oh, yeah, we got to do
every time you try to rush and get out of here.
Yeah, I just want to go here.
Yeah, of course, like and subscribe if you have not already. Please, one viewer, help us out. Follow us on Twitter at Pluralist Method. Throw us a donation or tip if you're able to. And thanks for coming in on this Sunday.
Again, I'm Dylan.
Yes, and I'm Jeremy. Have a good rest of your day.
All right.